I know not how long afterwards it was, whether a minute or an hour, but when I lifted my head suddenly from the lady's shoulder, all the place was in confusion. Everyone upon their feet, the talk and the drinking ceased, and all eyes turned to the far doorway, where the curtains were just dropping again as I looked, while in front of them were standing three men. These newcomers were utterly unlike any others, a frightful vision of ugly strength amidst the lolling loveliness all about. Low of stature, broad of shoulder, hairy, deep-chested, with sharp, twinkling eyes set far back under bushy eyebrows, retreating foreheads, and flat noses and face tanned to a dusky copper hue by exposure to every kind of weather that racks the extreme Martian climate. They were so opposite to all about me, so quaint and grim amongst these mild, fair-skinned folk, that at first I thought they were but a disordered creation of my fancy. I rubbed my eyes and stared and blinked, but no, they were real men of flesh and blood, and now that they had come down with as much stateliness as their bandy legs would admit of, into the full glare of the lights to the centre table where Hath sat, I saw their splendid apparel, the great strings of rudely polished gems hung round their hairy necks and wrists, the cunningly dyed skins of soft-furred animals, green and red and black, wherewithal their limbs were swathed, and then I heard some one by me whisper in a frightened tone, "The envoys from over seas." Oh, I thought sleepily to myself, so these are the ape-men of the western woods, are they? Those who long ago vanquished my white-skinned friends and yearly come to claim their tribute. Jove, what hay they must have made of them! How these peach-skinned girls must have screamed, and the downy striplings by them felt their dimpled knees knocked together, as the mad flood of barbarians came pouring over from the forest, and long ago stormed their citadels like a stream of red lava, as deadly, as irresistible, as remorseless. And I lay asprawl upon my arms on the table, watching them with the stupid indifference I thought I could so well afford. Meanwhile Hath was on foot, pale and obsequious like others in the presence of those dread ambassadors, but more collected, I thought. With deepest bows he welcomed them, handing them drink in a golden state cup, and when they had drunk, I heard the liquor running down their great throats in the frightened hush, like water in a runnel on a wet day. They wiped their fierce lips upon their furry sleeves, and the leader began reciting the tribute for the year. So much corn, so much wine, and very much it was, so many thousand ells of cloth and webbing, and so much hammered gold, and cinnabar and lar, precious metals of which I knew nothing as yet, and ever as he went growling through the list his harsh animal voice, he refreshed his memory with a coloured stick whereupon a notch was made for every item, the woodman not having come as yet apparently to the gentler art of written signs and symbols. Longer and longer that caravan of unearned wealth stretched out before my fancy, but at last it was done, or all but done, and the head envoy, passing the painted stick to a man behind, folded his bare sinewy arms, upon which the red fell bristles, as it does upon a gorilla's, across his ample chest, and, including us all in one general scowl, turned to Hath as he said, "All this for Arhap, the Wood King, my master and yours, all this, and the most beautiful woman here tonight at your tables." An item, I smiled stupidly to myself, for indeed I was very sleepy, and had no nice perception of things, which shows his majesty with the two-pronged name is a jolly fellow after all, and knows wealth is incomplete without the crown and priming of all riches. I wonder how the Martian boys will like this postscript. And, chin on hand, and eyes that would hardly stay open, I watched to see what would happen next. There was a little conversation between the prince and the ape-man. Then I saw Hath, the traitor, point in my direction and say, "Since you ask and will be advised, then, mighty sir, there can be no doubt of it. The most beautiful woman here tonight is undoubtedly she who sits yonder by him in blue." A very pretty compliment, I thought, too dull to see what was coming quickly, and handsome of Hath, all things considered. and so I dozed and dozed, and then started and stared. Was I in my senses? Was I mad or dreaming? The drunkenness dropped from me like a mantle. With a single smothered cry, I came to myself and saw that it was all too true. The savage envoy had come down the hall at Hal's vindictive prompting, and had lifted my fair girl to her feet, and there, even as I looked, had drawn her, white as death, into the red circle of his arms, and with one hand under her chin had raised her sweet face to within an inch of his, and was staring at her with small, ugly eyes. "Yes," said the envoy, more interested than he had spoken yet, "it will do. The tribute is accepted, for Arhap, my master." And taking shrinking Haru by the wrist, and laying a heavy hand upon her shoulder, he was about to lead her up the hall. I was sober enough then. I was on foot in an instant, and before all the glittering company, before these simpering girls and pale Martian youths who sat mumbling their fingers, too frightened to lift their eyes from off their half-finished dinners, I sprang at the envoy. I struck him with my clenched fist on the side of his bullet head, and he let go of Haru, who slipped insensible from his hairy chest like a white cloud slipping down the slopes of a hill at sunrise, and turned on me with a snort of rage. We stared at each other for a minute, and then I felt the wine fumes roaring in my head. I rushed at him and closed. It was like embracing a mountain bull, and he responded with a hug that made my ribs crackle. For a minute we were locked together like that, swinging here and there and then getting a hand loose. I belabored him so unmercifully that he put his head down, and that was what I wanted. I got a new hold of him as we staggered and plunged, roaring the while like wild beasts we were, the teeth clattering in the Martians' heads as they watched us, and then, exerting all my strength, lifted him fairly from his feet, and with supreme effort swung him up, shoulder high, and with a mighty heave hurled him across the tables, flung that ambassador whom no Martian dared look upon, crashing and sprawling through the gold and silver of the feast, whirled him round with such a splendid send that benches and trestle, tankards and flagons, chairs and cloths and candelabras all went down into thundering chaos with him. And the envoy only stayed when his sacred person came to a harbor amongst the westral odds and ends, the soiled linen, the dirty platters of our wedding feast. I remembered seeing him there on hands and knees, and then the liquor I had would not be denied. In vain I drew my hands across my drooping eyelids. In vain I tried to master my knees that knocked together. The spell of the love drink that Haru, blushing, had held to my lips was on me. Its soft, overwhelming influence rose like a prismatic fog between me and my enemy. Everything again became hazy and dreamlike, and feebly calling on Haru, my chin dropped upon my chest, my limbs relaxed, and I slipped down in drowsy oblivion before my rival.